welcome to Powder Room Africa. Today I'm joined by Rumbidzai Venge, a lawyer. We are going to discuss the Marriage Act. Rumbidzai, will you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
Thank you so much, Ray. Hello, it's a pleasure to be here with you unpacking this really topical piece of legislation. And it's exciting, really, when the masses are interested in what's happening.
Because you know why I called you to this discussion. I've heard a lot of people talking about this Marriage Act, like Anzi legalize chiuri. I don't know. What does it really mean? What is the purpose of this Marriage Act?
You know what? I think it's important that we unpack all of these things. The first and most important thing is that this is a law that came to equalize all the marriage regimes in the country. There were different types of marriages. Maybe you might not know that, but before this act was passed, we could see three different types of marriages. Pane chapter 511, chapter 37. This is your general law marriage. You could a certificate. It's monogamous, generally one man, one woman. Then pane ma customary law unions. They are unregistered customary law unions. Kana kuti ma uklu. This means in Nimdiwa wangu, his family and my family, tono visarora, and then paukama wedu, we acknowledge that Iwa takarorana, but at law, this was not considered to be a marriage. Sakavani wawa karambana, there were no property rights. So you see how you reacted like that. There were so many people left vulnerable. Sakavani wakachi one day in this country who are married have unregistered customary law unions. So they were left exposed and without property rights. And they would have some sort of recourse when a death occurs, my deceased estates, but it could be difficult to prove that you're married to someone maybe 20, 30 years on. Registered customary marriages. And these are potentially polygamous. The man could potentially take on more than one wife. Depending on the customs, the women are the ones who take on more than one man, polyandry. But in a customary union, so it's considered to be potentially possible. Then you get your marriage certificate in that customary law union. So these were the three marriages. But you'd see kuti pane wangauri pamusoro bijana, the general law marriage, because you would have more recognized rights. You have a certificate. Upon your divorce, the matrimonial causes act would apply. So there was fairness in how you would then distribute the things that you accumulated. Then there are also other things around the age of marriage. Mutemo wedu unotaura kuti mwana munhu ari under the age of 18 years. Zvichienderera kumberi pane mutemo yanga isina kunanganisana nazo, or what we call alignment with our constitution. Our constitution clearly states that a child is someone below the age of 18 and no child shall be married. So our criminal code yaitaurawo zvakare kuti mukasungwa kana mwana wacho ari kana kuti musikana wacho ari pasi pemakore 16 ndipo paiwanikwa pane mhosva. Kana ari above the age of 16 kana kuti akakura makore 16 zvichienda kumberi, it was acceptable that you could engage nezvepabonde, you could engage in sexual activity with a 16-year-old. Asi mutemo uri kutaura kuti you cannot get married. Yes. So this is one of the things that the Marriages Act then also does. It outlaws child marriage. It also talks about kuwirirana kana kuti vanhu vacho vari vaviri varoda kuchata, they must have given their consent. It must be voluntary. Imagine you're going to marry Gilbert. Gilbert, who you don't know.
20 times older than you.
Exactly, and maybe it's not your time.
But do you think that is applicable in the Zimbabwean context? For example, before the 18 years marriage concept, which was enacted recently, Pampane is 16 years here, and we have heard the cases of that much higher girl from the Joan Marange historic set. Is that applicable? Are we really working towards there, or is just something on paper?
You know what I think? Honestly, I think mutemo it's always on paper, but what brings that law to life is you and I, kuti kunyanya madzimai, I want to challenge women. in all these communities. Where are the women when these things are happening? You know, you must speak out. So pamwe vakaziva kuti pane mutemo unototaura kuti hazviitiki, then you know it will lead to that. And also the Marriages Act now penalizes anyone who is involved in that. Saka mbereki, mai, baba, natete, anyone who takes part in a child marriage can actually now go to jail. One going to get a level 10 fine imposed on them. They could actually also go to jail for a period up to 5 years. So I think the Marriage Act is really coming with a bite and a bark. Kuti aiwa toda kuti nyangu, if we say if you're found guilty of doing this, then you actually go to jail. So I think it's a good move, because mutemo wa clear now. Apasina kufungidzira kuti ni child marriage, what will happen if we find someone. What happened with that sad case, I think what was her name, Mildred
Anna Machaya.
Yeah, Anna Machaya. That sad Machaya case, Shorai, was that it was really difficult to charge them. Because Mutemo Wacho was still at the time a marriages bill, and wango chiri kubikwa, so kuti vawane charge inonyasa kubata where they've done something wrong, it was a bit hazy. So I believe that this is a progressive move in that respect.
Okay, let's talk about our tradition. We have our cultures as the Shona people, as the Zimbabwean people. Do you think kuti mutemo uyu ne culture yedu zvichatozonyatsopindirana, because we have some remote areas vachitobelieve kuti mukadzi should always be pasi pemurume wake, no matter what, whether you are right or wrong, you should always be pasi pemurume wako. Do you think mutemo wedu uyu uchazonyatsoningirikidza netradition and our culture iZimbabwe?
Chinotigaida ipapo is our constitution. Again, I want to come back to the constitution. It's the supreme law of the land. Ndiwo mutemo unofana kudirecta all other laws. And unotaura iyo kuti tino recognize your customary practices, your traditional practices. So in Zimbabwe, zvinotoonekwa nekutogashirwa kuti aiwa pane chivanhu, kune practices echivanhu, kune vanhu vedu vanobelieve in that, and you're free to do that to the extent that usingazodzvinyiriri munhu, to the extent where you are now getting into the constitutional rights. So there is that leeway kuti zvonzi aiwa itai zvamuri kuita, asi kana makurodza vanasikana, now that becomes criminal. Child marriage, now we're stopping you. Now mukaita zviku kana zviya zvonzi zvainzi ngozi kuri pangozi nemunhu, you know, and once you're being married off kuri pangozi, do this kugara naka, all of those practices. So when they get to a point where they're now unconstitutional, that aspect is no longer lawful. But zvonzi itai your traditional practices as long as it's within that constitutional context. And kuti vanhu vaziye vanofana kuudzwa, vanofana kunzwisisa kuti this is wrong and why it's wrong, and kuti there is punishment. Saka our traditional leaders, they're also carrying on a very important role, because ndivo vanoenda munzvimbo idzi vataura rural areas pamwe kuitito very far kwatsvaka uko, and then they are then supposed to understand mutemo voudza vagere munharaunda mavo.
And now there's an interesting part manje iri pamutemo uyu, the small house and boyfriends issue. Can you please explain?
Everyone is saying small house and boyfriend issue, but
I want to know.
Okay, you're talking about section 41. Okay. You know, what's called a civil partnership. Okay. So mutemo uri kuti, you know what, tinoziya kuti kune vamwe vanhu who are living together but they're not married. They are perhaps, you know, you want to call them small houses. Sometimes you know that these people are in relationships with people who are married to other people. You know, those 3 marriages that I talked about to begin with. Kuti pane munhu pamane general law marriage, like chapter 37, we can call him Bob. Bob anova sangana na Betty, they get married to chapter 37, chapter 511, yeah, general law marriage. Bob obuda osangana na Lizzie. Okay, alright. So I can give you an example and say that Pana Bob and Betty. Bob and Betty come together with a chapter 511 marriage. That's a general law marriage, not a one man, one woman. Bob uyobaona Sarah kunzo. He likes Sarah, he decides they get into a relationship. Maybe they're together for 3-4 years. Saka zviri kunzi nemutemo now kana Bob na Sarah uyu varambana anditi kana vane zvinhu zvavakaita accumulate vese vamakatenga imba vamakatenga mota, Sarah can now also come to court and say asi inini naBob kunyangwe akaroora hake umwe munhu under a different marriage, inini ndine maproperty rights pane zvinhu zvatakakumba tese, pane zvinhu zvataka-accumulata tiri tese. So now it's about giving property rights to that person. Mutemo waakuti taakurecognize kuti aiwa relationship yaBob naSarah kana vakakwanisa kumita a few of these, their stipulations. Hanzi tinotarisa kuti how long is the relationship been going on, are you living together on a genuine domestic basis. Zvireva kuti vamwe voti kuchaya mapoto here kana kuti pane zvemba apa zveshuwa, but your relationship it doesn't fall under the definitions of what a marriage is, but you've got interests and we want to protect those interests. Saka ndokuri kubva mutemo uku. Then let me give you another example. Toti Masimba naRumbidzai avanosangana. Masimba oenda kumusha kwaRumbidzai asi onobhadhara makanidzwa nani otsvakirai kuno chete. Handiti pachivanhu chedu zvonzi haana kuroora, asi Masimba naRumbidzai votorana, tonogara toita vana vedu, tiri kutogara every day like we are married. But mukazodzoka kuti mutarisa kuti pachivanhu, is it a marriage? It's not. Saka chii chinoitika pakati paMasimba naRumbidzai pakurambana? Because mutemo does not recognize that as a marriage. Hapana mutemo une formula yokuti munoshayana sei zvinhu. So this is where the Marriage Act was coming from. Kuti it's not a marriage according to zviri kutaura nemutemo, asi mutori mese muri kutogara mese, saka zvinofambiswa sei. Saka it's not just about girlfriends and small houses and boy toys.
Are there any other key aspects to this Marriage Act that we might need to know?
Absolutely. I'll just try and get us. There's so many exciting things about the Marriages Act, but you find now that there is an extra marriage regime that's now being recognized by the Marriages Act, which is called a qualified marriage. So say you are in Chechen, it's not, imimi pama practices, and you've got things that you do that you then deem a marriage, so if you recognize it pakutenda kwenyu, legally it's not a marriage. But now mutemo wakuti, no, if you can prove to us that there are certain things that this is in conforming with your practices as a religious sect, that will now be a qualified marriage. So it's exciting because it also opens up for maybe some of the groups that are always cast under shadows, then they can go in there and start to to look and regulate some of these unions. Also, when it comes to lobola or bride price or rora, it was very topical. Shora, you understand that for a general law marriage, and that's chapter 511 here, it wasn't a requirement. It has never been a requirement for you to show that rora rakapatara or that any customary practices have been undertaken. But now, what this Marriages Act does is that stays the same. But for a customary marriage, it is now a requirement that bride price be paid, because iyo yakambonitsa nyaya iyoyo, because machief wangu achiti muda kutitorera rora sei, ndomusimboti we-customary practice yacho.
2000s were saying
we don't want it. No, we don't want it.
We no longer want the lobola thing.
It's true, but we've come to a place where our customs, our traditions are being preserved, which comes back to that question that you asked, because now you have to pay rora, you have to follow those processes. And what is rora, you might be asking? Imombedze umai, rusambo, and those things must be ticked. But grocery, that's not rora. So it's now important kuti pane a measure for all of these marriages to fall into. There are also prohibited marriages. Tishitarisa certain relationships pane ukama, they are prohibited relationships because pane a degree of consanguinity, which means kuti mne ukama wakabatana say. And if you can actually show that you do have a very close relationship, then you will be forbidden from being married, even if you're above the age of 18, because incest is unlawful, incest is criminal. Saka hamane hamam, komane hundreds, you can't get married to each other.
Okay, then one last question. It's a follow-up question for the small boyfriend question that I asked. Maybe what people might want to know is, because I've been talking to people and I've been reading through some questions and stuff on internet about the Marriage Act. Is it now allowed to have a boyfriend or a small house when you're married? Because from my own understanding, you could sue someone. Can you please explain that?
That's a brilliant question. There are some aspects of this law that are positive, but some that leave a lot of people confused, because Mutemowe chapter 5:11 still states that a general law marriage is monogamous. So one man, one woman. So yes, if you find that, I'll come back to Bob, Betty and Sarah. If Betty finds out about Sarah, she can actually go to court. No claim adultery damages. So she can sue Sarah, who is the girlfriend, for loss of consortium, for pain and suffering, contumely, and actually claim damages. If Bob goes one further and then marries Sarah under chapter 5:11, he is guilty of bigamy, because again, it's monogamous. It's one man, one woman. But what the law then does is, Mutemo Oyu now allows Sarah, the girlfriend, the extramarital affair, the small house, to claim her property rights in terms of that her and Bob have accumulated together. So it's really trying to exist there, because on the one hand, a marriage is between two people, adults, consenting adults. If one goes out and does something else with another person, can the law regulate that? Should we do away with adultery? Does it mean then we should have the monogamous aspect of general law removed in order for there to be real harmonization? Because how can we harmonize all these marriages when they're so different?